Welcome back to the channel, guys, and in this video we're going to talk about the new Raspberry Pi operating system which has been released as a result of the good people at Debian releasing version 13. Now, all this time we've been using version 12 and now they've released version 13, which like all other of their previous releases has a code name. It's called Trixie. And if you didn't know, Trixie is actually the cute little dinosaur from Toy Story. Now, all of the major operating system releases, so when we're talking about major operating system releases, we're talking about the big numbers, so version 12, version 11, version 10. And as you can see, they all follow the theme of Toy Story. And this is a very common phenomenon. If you're in the tech industry, you'll know that all major software projects do tend to use a naming convention. And as you can see, Bullseye is also a character from Toy Story, and Wikipedia does reveal that version 14 of Debian is going to be named after Forky. I think that's a character from Toy Story 4, I can't be sure. But anyway, so there is a new release. It's codenamed Trixie. It's version 13, and the Raspberry Pi people have released version 6.0 of their Raspberry Pi operating system, which is based on Trixie. And one of the key marquee benefits is the upgrade to the new Linux kernel, which is 6.12. So this is kind of why I wanted to start on Wikipedia straight away. Now, the next thing I wanted to show you was there is an official press release from the Raspberry Pi people. As you can see, there's a comment about Toy Story films. And it also talks about how they're running out of names to name their operating system releases. But there's quite a lot of major fixes and improvements that have gone into this thing. There's a new theme, but the main thing that most Linux users will find really useful, especially Raspberry Pi users, is the new Control Center application, which is kind of useful if you're used to Mac operating systems, and if you're used to Windows, this will become a bit of a welcome feel to you. So this is kind of useful. There's a bookshelf upgrade which they've put in as well. So there's a lot of small utilities and features and packages that they have upgraded, but the main marquee headline improvement is this general feel of moving away from 32-bit architecture and systems and moving more in favor with 64-bit operating systems, architectures, packages and software. And so there is an official release notes that you can read from Debian. This is very techy, so if this is your flavor, then go ahead, read it. Most average users will probably not get a lot out of this, but it is there, and you can see that Debian 13, much like 12, does now support more 64-bit operating systems. I think on the official press release from Debian, they do make a comment on the more of the push towards 64-bit. One thing I'd really like, which I didn't know about these Linux upgrades, these major upgrades they provide, is these are all of the packages and software that comes bundled with it that gets upgraded at the same time. So MariaDB is familiar to me, Postgres is very familiar to me, OpenSSH, SSL, Samba, the Rust compiler, Python. If you're into the tech industry yourself, these things will look very familiar to you. But this is kind of another thing that's worth highlighting. This release for the first time officially supports the RISC architecture, the 64-bit architecture, which basically means it can now run on a lot more hardware, which was specifically designed for this particular architecture. So that's the official press release. Another thing that's worth talking about is the fact that I didn't want to do this upgrade, and the official, so here's the official guidance. They don't actually want you to do an in-place upgrade. I've forgotten the official. There's an official guidance or release note somewhere where they tell you that do not upgrade directly. Don't do an in-place upgrade, just do an image-based install. That's what they officially recommend. But for most users who come from more from Windows background, that's something that's going to really turn you off, because who has the time to keep flashing and re-imaging their Linux home labs all of the time? Honestly, it's a bit of a turn off. But the main thing I want to show you on this screen is the fact that if you choose to upgrade to Trixie, there's quite a long-term support cycle for it. It's commonly referred to as LTS support cycles, which is once again very common in the software world. But I got Gemini. I've come to learn and lean on Gemini quite a lot for all of my forays into the world of Raspberry Pi and Linux. But I did ask it to break down what was going on. And you can see, while Debian has a long history supporting a wide array of architectures, Debian 13 is a clear and significant shift towards more 64-bit centric future. So almost like they're kind of future-proofing their operating system. So this is a really good place to start, because depending on how knowledgeable you are, the Raspberry Pi, the ARM Cortex CPU that they use, it supports the 32-bit Linux kernel and the 64-bit Linux kernel, and depending on the operating system you install, the appropriate kernel is used. And Raspberry Pi and its processors have supported 64-bit for a while, so hopefully there's not a lot you're going to see coming straight out of the box, but there's supposed to be a lot more performance and memory management improvements that you do get out of it. So it brings a whole significant improvements ranging from new kernel, updated software packages, underdone architectural changes, enhanced performance, future-proofing the system. 12 and 13 do fully support 64-bit ARM architectures, with 13 being the latest, and it does have good compatibility and support for Raspberry Pi 5. It has long-term support for the long-term supported version of the Linux kernel, and then there's also a comment about compatibility with a wider range of peripherals. That's more to do with the microcontrollers people use for more of the custom homebrew stuff. And then there's another thing that's worth pointing out, is that one of the reasons why they don't recommend you to do an unplace upgrade is that if you've customized your installation, chances are there's a lot more things that can go wrong. So they prefer you to just wipe and start again. So the official guidance is don't do what we're about to do in this video, but this is purely an experiment from my side. So next part of the video, we're going to jump straight into the actual steps I follow to get my Raspberry Pi Bookworm image upgraded to Trixie. And honestly, it was actually pretty straightforward, so tune in for that. Now, before we jump into the tutorial part of the video, there's some housekeeping that we have to do first. Now, in order to do the upgrade, like the way I did, my approach successfully builds upon the two initial projects I worked on for the channel and obviously for my home lab. So if you've been following along, hopefully you will have seen my 3 ways to connect project, which is this one, and then my second project, which is the simple NAS server project. And the reason why these projects are very important is that it will make your life significantly easier when it comes to following this very detailed tutorial, which is on the official Raspberry Pi forums. So before we jump into that, it's worthwhile mentioning that if you see anything that doesn't really make any sense to you, it's probably because it's been covered in one of these 2 videos. So this video covers the various different ways you can connect to your Raspberry Pi, such as XRDP and SSH. I use SSH in this upgrade for my Debian operating system upgrade from 12 to 13. And then I use my Raspberry Pi initially as a NAS server, very simple NAS server. So there's no Docker on there. There's no official true NAS kind of Docker images that are running on there and are running NAS servers for me with open source software. It's nothing like that. Mine is literally just a network mounted folder which I freely access from my Mac and my Windows machines, and that's ultimately why I called it simple NAS server. So the second part is housekeeping. The housekeeping part is basically backup all of your critical and crucial config files. Now, I put mine here, so these are the key things that I was interested in making sure that I had backed up, because honestly, I just don't have the time to be re-imaging my Raspberry Pi, starting again from scratch from an official Debian 13 image. It's just not conducive all of the time. People just don't have that kind of free time or leisure time to do it. So as an experiment, I decided that I'm going to do an in-place upgrade. So I backed up my Samba config, my SSH config. I also backed up my XRDP config and my FS tab file, which is where the mounts and stuff like that are defined. Now you can get Gemini to script. I don't have it, unfortunately I don't have it to hand, but you can actually ask Gemini to back up these key areas and whatever else you're interested in, and Gemini should be able to produce a tar file that you can just put straight into an SSH session, and then it will just back up these files and then you can just copy them straight off there. That's the beauty of it. Now I think I did it directly from SSH here, and then I think I copied it directly onto my local machine. I've got PS readline on here, so I might be able to find the tar command, but it doesn't look like it. But So the third part of the housekeeping video is the official guidance on the upgrade documentation is you should not do an in-place upgrade, which is what I'm about to do. They tell you to officially back up all your files and do a clean upgrade via the image itself using, I think, the Raspberry Pi imager. So that's the third part of the housekeeping. They don't officially advise you to do what I'm about to do. And one of the reasons why they tell you not to do it this way is because if you've heavily customized your image, like most hardcore advanced Raspberry Pi or Linux users do, chances are they cannot cover off all the different exotic scenarios as part of an upgrade scenario. So they will always advise you, back up your stuff, and then just do a clean upgrade from an image, like I've done. Anyway, so as I was mentioning earlier, the Simple NAS server project has come in tremendously handy because I've been able to store my config. So if anything goes wrong with my Raspberry Pi, my operating system upgrade, I do have the ability to safely go back here and start again. So the actual upgrade itself was incredibly straightforward, and I just followed this official guide from the forums. This is linked from the official press release somewhere in here. In this official press release from the Raspberry Pi people, you'll find a link to the forum which details this upgrade if you are interested in following the upgrade in this way. But I'm going to prove to you in literally about 60 seconds it is doable, and there weren't as many red flags as I expected because I actually haven't heavily customized my Raspberry Pi. If you've been following along, all I've done is set up a Samba share, SSH access, XRDP access, and then I set up a Samba share so I can access my files. And as you can see, it's going pretty successfully because I've got an incredibly large collection of Family Guy clips building. I ain't got a clue what I'm going to do with them just yet, but I decided to store them somewhere, and that's one of the benefits of it. Oh, I've just realised I've got a typo on screen capture recordings. Anyway, so with that aside, I followed this guide exactly as it's laid out by this incredibly useful forum user. And the one thing that I got stuck on was the sources list. So I got Gemini to script this part for me, and it produced me this incredibly useful sed command, which is a substitution command. And what it does is it digs into these different files that you've told it to dig into, and what it'll do is it'll replace Bookworm for Trixie. And I can't sing Gemini's praises enough as something, as a tool, as an aid for exploring Linux, because Linux can get hard quickly. So that was the key thing. The last thing I wanted to talk about is this whole upgrade process only took me about under 15 minutes, and I had my Raspberry Pi booting via SSH. And the other key thing I wanted to talk about is I used SSH access, as you can see here. I used SSH access to get into my box, and then if I go up you can see the commands that I ran. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it this way was so that I can actually lift the commands from the tutorial without any spelling mistakes, because as you can see there, it's very important the commands are entered with punctuation, as he says there, check for punctuation. So this is very important. So for punctuation, he's referring to the quotes, in case you're wondering what does he mean. And as proof, this whole process does work, because if you were able to successfully get through the whole upgrade process, then you should have a Raspberry Pi instance that looks similar to mine. And that's it. That's the whole upgrade. I've customized mine. I've changed the icon sizes and moved the taskbar to the bottom. I think it's called the taskbar. And one of the key new features they've dropped in this version of Raspberry Pi operating system, which is 6.0, I believe, is this new control center. So that's it. So thanks for tuning in. Pay attention to the housekeeping. Pay attention to the previous videos where I covered how to access how to get into your Raspberry Pi and setting up a simple NAS server so you can store your config files on there. And also pay attention to the fact that they don't officially tell you to upgrade your Raspberry Pi instances in this way. Pay attention to the fact that you should back up your important files first, and more importantly, treat it as an experiment like I have. I don't know how long this is going to be, it's going to work for, but for the time being, it means I can now move on to putting Docker on here and move on to my next project, which is a vibe coding project. So I'll talk about that soon. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and see you in the next one. Bye.